Daniel checked the large departure board for the third time in 10 minutes. The train to Chicago had been delayed again, this time because of heavy snowfall farther up the line. The crowded station buzzed with impatient travelers, rolling suitcases, crying children, and the constant announcements echoing through the high ceilings. Some passengers complained at the ticket counter, while others searched for empty seats near the platforms. Daniel wasn't in a hurry. As a high school history teacher, he had learned long ago that waiting was simply part of traveling. He found an empty bench near platform 7, placed his backpack beside him, and bought a cup of hot coffee from a nearby vending machine. Outside the station's giant glass windows, snowflakes drifted gently through the cold evening air. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, giving the entire station a calm but lonely atmosphere. He pulled a novel from his backpack and began reading, occasionally looking up whenever another train arrived. Every few minutes, streams of passengers poured onto the platforms, greeting loved ones with hugs or rushing toward waiting taxis. Nearly half an hour passed before something unusual caught his attention. A young woman hurried through the station, nervously looking over her shoulder every few seconds. She couldn't have been older than 25. She wore a dark green coat that was slightly torn near one sleeve, and loose strands of brown hair clung to her face as if she had been running through the snow. In her arms, she carried a baby wrapped tightly in a soft blue blanket. At first, Daniel assumed she was simply late for a train. But then he noticed her expression. She wasn't just rushing. She looked terrified. Her eyes searched every corner of the station, as though she expected someone to appear at any moment. Daniel watched quietly as she stopped near one of the station pillars, breathing heavily. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and tried making a call. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. She closed her eyes for a second, fighting back tears. The baby began crying softly. She gently rocked him in her arms, while whispering comforting words Daniel couldn't hear from where he sat. A loud announcement echoed through the station. Train 428 to Chicago has been delayed by another 45 minutes. Passengers groaned in frustration. Daniel looked back toward the young woman. She was gone. Confused, he glanced around the station. Then, without warning, she appeared directly in front of him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaking. Daniel stood politely. "Yes." She stared at him for several seconds without speaking, as though trying to make an impossible decision. Finally, she asked, "Can I trust you?" Daniel frowned. "I'm sorry." She looked over her shoulder again. Two men wearing black jackets had just entered the station through the main entrance. The moment she saw them, the color drained from her face. Her breathing became faster. "They found me," she whispered. Daniel followed her gaze, but saw nothing unusual except two strangers walking through the crowd. Before he could ask another question, the woman stepped closer. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Without warning, she carefully placed the baby into Daniel's arms. His eyes widened. "Wait, what are you doing?" She gently adjusted the blanket around the baby and looked directly into his eyes. "Please," she whispered, "don't let anyone take him." Daniel instinctively held the child to keep him safe. "Where are you going?" "I'll be back." "When?" 10 minutes. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Emma." "And the baby's name?" A faint smile appeared despite the fear on her face. "Noah." Before Daniel could ask anything else, Emma slipped a folded envelope beneath the baby's blanket. "If I don't come back," she began. She stopped herself, shaking her head. "I will come back." Daniel stepped toward her. "Emma, you don't have to leave him with a stranger." "I know." "Then why me?" She looked at him for one long second. Because when I walked into this station, you were the only person who looked kind. Daniel stood speechless, the baby's tiny fingers wrapped around one of his. Emma smiled through her tears. Please keep him safe. Then she turned and disappeared into the crowd before Daniel could stop her. He tried following her, but hundreds of passengers crossed between them. Within seconds, she had vanished. Daniel looked down at the baby sleeping peacefully in his arms. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 45. Every time the station doors opened, Daniel looked up, expecting Emma to return. She never did. As another announcement echoed through the station, 2 uniformed railway police officers began walking directly toward him. Daniel suddenly realized he was sitting alone in one of the busiest train stations in the city, holding a baby that wasn't his, with nothing except a mysterious envelope hidden beneath the blanket and the fading promise of a woman who had disappeared without a trace. Daniel's heart pounded as the 2 railway police officers approached. He tightened his grip on the baby, who had finally fallen asleep against his chest. "Sir," one of the officers said politely, "is everything all right?" Daniel quickly stood. I don't think so." The officers exchanged a glance. "What happened?" Daniel took a deep breath and explained everything from the beginning. The frightened woman, the 2 men she seemed afraid of, the baby she had placed in his arms, and her promise to return in 10 minutes. One officer looked around the station. "What did she look like?" Daniel described Emma in as much detail as he could. The officers immediately radioed station security. Within minutes, surveillance staff began reviewing the security cameras, while announcements quietly alerted security personnel without alarming the public. One officer looked at Daniel. "Did she leave you anything?" Daniel suddenly remembered the envelope hidden beneath the baby's blanket. Carefully, he pulled it out. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first line made his stomach tighten. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't come back." Daniel looked at the officers before continuing. "My name is Emma Carter. The baby is my son, Noah. Please don't let anyone take him until you find Detective James Miller. Don't trust anyone else, no matter what they tell you. Someone has been following us for weeks. If they find Noah, they'll never stop searching." The station suddenly felt much colder. One officer immediately contacted headquarters. "Find Detective James Miller," he said into his radio. "The letter specifically mentions him." The second officer carefully took the note as evidence. Meanwhile, Noah began crying again. Daniel gently rocked him. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're going to figure this out." The baby slowly calmed down. Nearly 30 minutes later, a man in his early 50s hurried into the station. He wore a long dark coat with a detective's badge hanging from his belt. "I'm Detective Miller." The officers quickly handed him the letter. As he read it, his expression changed completely. "Where did you get this?" Daniel explained everything once again. Miller remained silent for several moments. "I was afraid this would happen." Daniel frowned. "You know her?" The detective nodded. "I've been trying to protect Emma for nearly 3 months. What is she running from?" Miller looked around before lowering his voice. "Not here." They moved into a private office inside the station. Noah had fallen asleep again, completely unaware of the conversation happening around him. Miller closed the door. "Emma worked as an accountant for one of the largest investment companies in the state." Daniel listened carefully. "Several months ago," the detective continued, "she discovered millions of dollars disappearing through fake companies. Someone was stealing it." "Yes." "And the people responsible discovered that she knew." Daniel's eyes widened. "So they started following her." Miller nodded. "She agreed to become a witness." "What about Noah?" That's exactly why she refused to disappear immediately. The detective sighed. She wanted to keep her son with her. Daniel looked down at the sleeping baby. So tonight, we arranged for Emma to meet one of our undercover officers here. What happened? We lost contact with the officer 20 minutes before she arrived. Silence filled the room. Daniel slowly realized the terrible possibility. You think they found her? I'm afraid so. Before anyone could speak again, another officer rushed into the room. Detective, what is it? We found something on the security cameras. Everyone hurried to the surveillance office. The footage showed Emma entering the station exactly as Daniel had described. She looked frightened from the moment she walked inside. Then another camera captured two men entering through the main entrance only seconds later. They're the same men, Daniel said immediately. The video continued. Emma spotted Daniel sitting alone on the bench. She hesitated. Then she walked toward him. The cameras clearly showed her placing Noah into Daniel's arms. Moments later, she walked quickly toward another exit. One of the two men followed her. The second disappeared in another direction. Then, the footage suddenly froze. What happened? Miller demanded. The technician frowned. Someone remotely disabled this camera for nearly 4 minutes. Miller's face hardened. They planned this. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. So Emma knew she wasn't coming back. I don't think she did, Miller replied. I think she hoped she would. Another technician called out from the far side of the room. Detective, we've got another camera. They switched to footage from outside the station. The snowy street appeared on the screen. Emma ran across the parking lot. A black SUV pulled alongside her. Two men jumped out. She tried to escape. The camera angle was poor, but everyone saw the struggle. Seconds later, the vehicle sped away into the snowy night. Emma was gone. The room fell completely silent. Daniel looked at Noah sleeping peacefully in his arms. The little boy had no idea that his entire world had changed in just a few minutes. Detective Miller stared at the frozen image of the SUV before quietly saying, They've taken Emma. He turned toward Daniel with determination in his eyes. And until we bring her back, Noah is the only witness they can never be allowed to find. Daniel barely slept that night. Every time Noah stirred in his sleep, Daniel was reminded that somewhere out there, a desperate mother had risked everything to protect her child. Detective Miller arranged for both of them to stay in a secure location while a special police unit searched for Emma. The mysterious black SUV was identified through traffic cameras leaving the city, but after that, it disappeared without a trace. The following morning, Miller arrived carrying a folder filled with photographs and reports. We finally know who we're dealing with, he said. Daniel looked up. The men who took Emma work for Victor Langston. The businessman? Daniel asked. The same one who appears on television donating money to charities. Miller nodded. Behind that public image is a criminal empire built on fraud, money laundering, and intimidation. Emma discovered financial records that could send him to prison for the rest of his life. Daniel looked at the sleeping baby in the crib beside him. So Noah isn't just her son? No, Miller replied quietly. He's the reason Emma never agreed to disappear into witness protection. She believed she could protect him herself. 3 days passed with no sign of Emma. News channels reported her as a missing person, but they had no idea what was really happening. Meanwhile, Noah had grown comfortable around Daniel. The little boy smiled whenever Daniel entered the room, laughed while playing with his fingers, and peacefully fell asleep whenever Daniel held him. Daniel had never imagined becoming responsible for a child, even temporarily. Yet every moment with Noah strengthened his determination to bring Emma home. Late on the 4th evening, Detective Miller's phone suddenly rang. He answered immediately. After only a few seconds, his expression changed. They found her. Daniel stood so quickly his chair nearly fell over. Is she alive? Miller nodded. Barely. An abandoned warehouse nearly 50 miles outside the city had been raided after police tracked one of Langston's associates. Inside, officers found Emma locked in a storage room. She was exhausted, weak, and dehydrated, but alive. She had refused to reveal where Noah was, despite days of threats. Daniel and Miller drove straight to the hospital. Emma lay quietly in a hospital bed, her face pale but peaceful. The moment she opened her eyes, she looked around the room anxiously. My baby. Daniel stepped forward. He's safe. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Noah? Daniel smiled gently. He's been safe every second. Emma began crying with relief. Minutes later, Detective Miller carried Noah into the room. The tiny boy looked around curiously before seeing his mother. Emma stretched out her arms. The nurse carefully placed Noah beside her. The little boy reached toward her face, and Emma held him tightly, unable to stop crying. I thought I'd never see you again, she whispered. Daniel quietly turned away, giving them a private moment. Even Detective Miller wiped his eyes. Over the next several weeks, Emma recovered while the investigation continued. The financial documents she had secretly copied became the key evidence prosecutors needed. Victor Langston and several members of his organization were arrested. News stations across the country covered the story. The woman who had risked everything to expose corruption was finally safe. Months later, Daniel received an envelope in the mail. Inside was an invitation. Noah's first birthday. At the bottom of the card, Emma had written a short message. Our family wouldn't be complete without the man who protected my son. Daniel smiled as he folded the invitation. When he arrived at the small birthday party, colorful balloons filled the backyard. Children laughed while families gathered around picnic tables. Emma walked toward him carrying Noah, who immediately recognized Daniel. The little boy reached out with both hands and laughed happily. I think he remembers you, Emma said with a smile. Daniel gently picked Noah up. I've missed you too, little guy. A familiar voice interrupted them. I've been wanting to meet you. Daniel turned around. An older woman stood beside him. My name is Sarah, she said. I'm Emma's mother. She embraced Daniel before he could react. Thank you for believing in my daughter when no one else could. Daniel smiled modestly. I only did what anyone should have done. She shook her head. No. Most people would have walked away. As the afternoon went on, Detective Miller arrived with good news. The court sentenced Victor Langston to decades in prison, he announced. The rest of his organization has been dismantled. Everyone applauded. Emma looked toward Daniel. You know, she said quietly, the day I entered the train station, I believed I had run out of hope. She looked at Noah playing happily on the grass. But Hope was sitting alone on a bench with a backpack and a cup of coffee. Daniel laughed. I was just waiting for my train. Emma smiled warmly. And instead, you changed our lives forever. Daniel realized that the delayed train he had complained about had actually led him to the most important journey of his life. Sometimes, destiny doesn't arrive with grand signs or perfect timing. Sometimes, it begins with a frightened stranger, a baby wrapped in a blue blanket, and one impossible request that changes everything forever.